It's time to talk companions, villains, and blue police boxes in the Doctor Who action figure line, and Matthew from Batman March is back to help me make the definitive picks. First, let's get one thing out of the way. I didn't forget about the War Doctor in the last video. In fact, I deliberately omitted him because his character is an anachronism that falls outside the numbering of the regenerations. In short, it messes everything up. I would have preferred Christopher Eccleston or Paul McGann in Day of the Doctor instead. Given that the best figure of the War Doctor comes with McGann's head, let's just say that it was McGann and move on with our lives. Since Matthew and I did the last video, there have been a few new figures to come out from character options. I'll do my best to address these when it's relevant. We're only going to walk you through figures that have multiple variations. In other words, only figures where you have to make a choice. Let's start with the earliest companion available, Jo Grant.
Are you trying to tell me that this whole thing's been arranged just for your benefit?
Well, yes, that's right. You see, that stuff seemed to ignore me as soon as it saw the Doctor.
This is going to be an interesting one, again, because this isn't my preferred look for this character. It's going to be the Claws of Axos version. Now, I actually prefer her outfit in The Three Doctors, and I love that that was a figure that they made. Unfortunately, however, I thought that the face sculpt on that figure was really quite bad, and for Katie Manning, who was a real beauty, it really just didn't do her justice at all. So I prefer the Claws of Axos version simply because they remade the face and it looks so much better. It looks so much more like Katie Manning. I think they just did a really good job with the sculpt overall. So although not my preferred costume, that has to be the definitive just because it looks the more accurate figure.
Admittedly, I prefer the figure in the brown dress from The Time Monster, though I concede Matthew's point that character options have had some challenges capturing Katie Manning's face. But I find the Axos costume on the figure comes off looking rather muddy in places, and I like the very different look of the brown dress. It makes the figure stand out a bit to me.
Get the men out, Benton. Complete evacuation. Then report to me in the laboratory. Is that clear? Over.
In terms of the Brigadier, again, there's been quite a few variations of him, but in terms of a definitive look, I'm going to go with the Three Doctors version. And the reason for this is because that is the full Brigadier uniform regalia. And that's not to say that I don't like the other versions. I love the other versions in the jumper. They're great. But that is such a good look. You know, it just really pops on the shelf. And it's a variation of his outfit that he wore across various Doctors, so I think that one has to be definitive, but, you know, they're all very good in their own way.
Matthew's pick is a beautiful figure, but my preference would be for a more battle-ready Brig, and I'm glad they gave us that choice, and also the ability to choose between the beret and the cap, because I much prefer the cap look. There are other versions, including a rather dodgy early Brig that's just the Brig's head on Jack Harkness's repainted RAF body. So my pick would be the version that comes with the Demons figure set, because it has so much going on with the binoculars and the swagger stick and pistol, and it gives us the Brig as he was essentially seen in Robot. For my money, it's this Brig if I can only have one.
Let's go, shall we?
How? They're magnetically locked.
But the power is low.
Sarah Jane, well, we've not really had a Sarah Jane from the classic series, sadly. We've had many variations from the modern series in terms of her appearance in School Reunion and then the Sarah Jane Adventures figures. So for me, I will go with the Sarah Jane from School Reunion. And the reason being is not only is it her, you know, her sort of proper Doctor Who look, for want of a better term, but I think this version of the figure has a youthfulness to the face that you could actually quite easily get away with posing it with your Fourth Doctor figure, for instance. And it wouldn't surprise me if at some point, perhaps, they'll release a classic version of Sarah Jane just using that head sculpt. I would not be opposed to that. So I think, yeah, that version, that's the costume that actually appeared in Doctor Who, so I think that has to be the definitive Sarah Jane. Of course, if there was a classic Sarah Jane, then That would have been on the list, but sadly, that wasn't to be.
Totally agree with Matthew. The school reunion Sarah Jane Smith is the one you want. And try to get the UK release, because the American release from Underground Toys has a markedly inferior paint app on her face. The various Sarah Jane Adventures figures aren't always bad if you can find them with good faces, but they don't come close to a classic Sarah Jane. If you like a more modern Sarah Jane, the Adventures figure with the vest is a good close enough for the Doctor's Army Sarah Jane from Journey's End.
Oh, it's a yo-yo. It's a game. I thought you were enjoying it.
Enjoying it? You said I had to keep it going up and down. I thought it was part of the magic.
So there's been a few variations of Leela as well, but for me, in terms of a definitive look, it's going to have to be the original Face of Evil. And the reason being is because, again, it's the outfit that she wore predominantly during her time as a companion in the series. And I've never really been a fan of the paler costume in the series itself. I've always preferred the more intricate design of the darker brown leather dress. So yes, I think because it's the predominant version seen in the series, that one just wins out.
I agree that the original Face of Evil Leela figure is the definitive version. For some reason, though, I personally prefer the paler costume that she wore later in her run on Doctor Who. I'm also one of those weird people that likes the Invasion of Time, so I admit I like the later outfit, and that's the figure I display.
Look, Doctor, do you really think you're up to this? I mean, you've only recently regenerated, and yet you've undertaken so much work.
For Perry, most of these versions of the character are just repaints of the same sculpt, with exception to the Caves of Androzani version. But I'm going to have to say that I really like the blue version that came in the Vengeance on Varos 2-pack with Syl, not only because it comes with a great Doctor Who monster, but I just think that the head sculpt on this version of the figure looks superior to the Caves of Androzani one, and that is really just it. Also, I would also say that because I see Perry more as a 6th Doctor companion more than she was a Peter Davison companion, it looks better to have her in her correct outfit posed with that Doctor up on the shelf.
I agree that the blue outfitted Perry looks great alongside the 6th Doctor figure. However, because of my love for Caves of Androzani and the fact that Davison's 5th Doctor has not had any of his classic companions released yet as figures, the Androzani Perry is my preference because she can stand between Davison and Colin Baker as a transition companion for display. Also, I like the face sculpt on this figure. Don't ask me why, I can't explain it, but I think it gives off that Nicola Bryant look quite well. I also love the added detail of the shirt. There's more going on with this figure in general to my eye. We do now have another Perry in that kind of 80s jazzercise outfit with the headband, but honestly, I can't see this being anyone's definitive pick.
Save it, save it! You can't run. You're not good to me like this.
I want to nail those scumbags. I want to make them very, very unhappy.
For Ace, both versions of the figure are excellent. They did a really good job. But I'm going to have to go with the original release, which was the Remembrance of the Daleks version. And it's not really anything to do with the outfit or anything like that. It's just because of the level of accessories that came with this figure. You have the rucksack, you have the cans of Nitro 9, you've got the bazooka. You can even put the cans of Nitro 9 in her rucksack if you want to. Really, really great. They really knocked it out of the park being able to do that with that figure. So she's a great companion, one of my favourites, and they did a really, really good job with that version of the figure.
Completely agree with Matthew. If you want a definitive Ace right out of the package, the Remembrance of the Daleks version is the one to get. I confess I prefer the hairstyle and rolled-up jacket sleeves of the Silver Nemesis version, which seems to reflect Ace more commonly from her run on Doctor Who. But when it comes to display, I go with the Daleks version.
For K9, they haven't done many variations of him, they're mainly repaints, but it's going to have to be the B&M set, which was in the sort of grey, metallic grey colouring. And the reason being is because that's the sort of classic look for K9. Not to say that there's anything wrong with the modern look, the sort of bluishy silver look, which also looks nice, but I just think for me, that was what K9 looked like growing up, that was his colouring. So it's the version that he was seen as predominantly in the programme with Tom Baker. So that's all it is, really. It's just that was the look of K9 more so than the new version.
Yeah, the 3-pack K9 in gray is a no-brainer. There's no sense in going after any of the others if you're only going to get one.
Whoa! Okay.
Hello.
Hello. Welcome back.
For Rose, we've only had 2 versions of her character released as a figure, and it has to be the second release, the Series 2 look. It hasn't really got anything to do with the costume being, a preferred version in my eyes. It's just because the figure is far superior to the original release, which was a very static, not quite there with the getting her appearance quite right. Her likeness isn't great on that original version, and the Series 2 version is just leaps and bounds above it. So that has to be the better version to have on the shelf.
Yeah, you don't want the disco version. Saying that, much like with Sarah Jane Smith, you'll want to look at the US and UK releases of the second version of Rose before you make your choice. The UK version seems to have a more Billie Piper look to her eyes, but she's extra pale, while the US version has tanner skin, but her likeness isn't as strong as the original UK figure.
A warp fold conjugation trapped in a carbonized shell. It's an explosion, Mickey. An explosion waiting to happen.
Captain Jack, he had a couple of variants in the toy line, but for me it's got to be the Series 3 look with the revolver, just because he's got the great big trench coat on that you see him in for a lot of Series 3 and all of Torchwood. So, that crosses off 2 series on the list. And he comes with his revolver, and it just sort of really completes the look. And the head sculpt's, I think, probably better than on the original version. And yeah, it's just the more iconic look for that character.
In terms of building a Doctor's Army grouping, I agree that the long-coated version of Jack Harkness is the best choice. But I won't lie, that Jack in the RAF battle dress calls to me, especially the rarer version with the officer's cap.
What you say last time, was that you and Rose?
Yeah, it was, yeah.
You're taking me to the same planets that you took her?
What's wrong with that?
Nothing. Just ever heard the word rebound?
Martha Jones only had a couple of figures in the line, so really the only version that you can go with has to be the burgundy jacket and the jeans look, which is, quite honestly, it is the iconic look for her character because it was used in all of the promotional material for Series 3. So, yeah, you could be forgiven for thinking that she didn't wear anything else.
Matthew's right, this is the figure of record, but I throw myself at the mercy of the court in saying that I prefer the more tactical version of Martha. Give her one of Mickey's rifles and she could almost be Martha from Journey's End. I just think she looks way cool and it gives your display more variety so not everyone is in jeans and jackets.
Oi, Churchill. TARDIS key. The one you just took from the Doctor?
Oh, she's good, Doctor.
Amy Pond, again, not many variations of her character in the toy line. So, kind of like with Martha, it's got to be the original Series 5 figure in the brown leather jacket and the mini skirt with the red shirt. Again, this was a version of the costume that seemed to be used on all of the promotional material for Series 5, all of the teasers, even the adventure games that were coming out. So that really does seem to be the definitive look for that character.
In terms of a definitive Amy Pond, Matthew isn't wrong. But much like my pick for the 12th Doctor figure in the last episode, my opinion is swayed by my love for a particular episode, 11th Hour. It's one of the best Doctor Who episodes in the modern era, and the image of the 11th Doctor and Amy in the police uniform is essential to that. So my preference is the Amy figure from the Christmas Adventure set that depicts her from that episode.
Does this work?
Hey?
Is this actually what you do? Do you just crook your finger and people just jump in your snog box and fly away?
It is not a snog box.
I'll be the judge of that.
In terms of Clara, this is a bit of a difficult one because we've never really had a actual proper screen accurate version of Clara. The closest we've got is the Oswin figure in the red dress with the utility belt, which isn't the same character. So it has to really be the later version that was a repaint in the sort of bluish purpley dress. And it kind of resembles her outfit in, I think it's the Time of the Doctor, without the checkered pattern. But it's not quite there. But it makes more sense to have her posed with the Doctor than perhaps Oswin with her whisk and her utility belt, which doesn't really resemble anything Clara wore in the series.
Yeah, the purple dress is really the only choice, sad to say.
Exterminate.
Okay, let's talk Daleks. Matthew, you only get one variant of the Daleks for your pick. So which one is it going to be?
If I could only choose one Dalek from the 5-inch line to keep, it would have to be the sound effects Dalek from Power of the Daleks. That beautiful silver and blue colouring with the solar slats going around the shoulder section and the what is referred to as like the egg cup dome lights. It's a real shame that they didn't release other variations of this figure without the sound effects in, because I would have loved to have army built this. It's actually really quite difficult to get hold of now for a reasonable price. But it is such a wonderful look. I know people really love the gunmetal grey versions of the 70s, but for me, I think the Daleks looked at their best during the 60s in that silver and blue colouring.
Yes, it's the answer you'd expect, and I'm one of those people that Matthew mentioned. The grey and black Daleks from Genesis of the Daleks are my top choice. I love the no-nonsense look about them. It's an easy answer for me.
Still only a police box.
All right, let's talk blue police boxes. Character options have given us a number to choose from, thankfully.
This TARDIS question was probably the most difficult question to answer throughout all of these questions. Definitive TARDIS, I'm going to go with the Hartnell variation. Now, this is a bit of a weird one because it doesn't really resemble the look of the Hartnell TARDIS that much, other than the fact that it's got white windows and a white door sign. And even the St. John Ambulance sticker isn't anything like what we see in the TV series. However, I'm going to pick it because it just looks beautiful. The colouring of it, the weathering of it, you've got lots of different shading there with the darker blue, the lighter blue, all of that brown and green weathering at the bottom to make it look like it's dirty and muddy. It is absolutely beautiful. It's a really lovely TARDIS toy. So I think that I'm going to have to go with that because I prefer the look of the classic TARDIS anyway. I prefer the shape of it compared to the larger, chunky modern boxes I'm not so keen on. It's close enough to what we see in the original series, and it just looks lovely. It's just a really lovely toy.
This one was tough for me. I would have originally gone with the first Tom Baker TARDIS made, but then they released Tom Baker's TARDIS from the earliest episodes of his run with Sarah Jane Smith, and that would have supplanted my first choice for sure. Recently, they've come out with a slew of new TARDIS choices, so let's look at them all again. The Hartnell box is quite nice, but I've never been wild about the white window frames. The Pertwee box is an eye-burning shade of blue. The Baker boxes are pretty cool, but they are pretty stripped down, and the newly released Shada box couldn't be definitive given how specific it is. The 7th Doctor's box has always been far too powder blue for me. The modern boxes are just too big and chunky. But this newly released 5th Doctor TARDIS from Caves of Androzani is pretty spectacular, I must admit. I love the coloring, the detail, and the fact that it's got the higher roof like the original. While I do love the early Tom Baker box, it isn't as definitive a look as this box achieves. Okay, villains with a name. You only get to pick one for your definitive figure collection. Go.
If I had to have one named villain from the toy line, it's going to have to be Davros, and it's going to be the Resurrection of the Daleks, or Revelation of the Daleks version, so the Terry Malloy variation of the character. Why that character and not like the Master or Sutek? I just think Davros is one of the best villains in Doctor Who. He is absolutely superb, and as much as I love Michael Wisher in Genesis of the Daleks, I adore Terry Malloy's portrayal of Davros. I think he's wonderful. He's brilliant in the TV series. He's excellent on audio with Big Finish. And the look of the toy, they really knocked it out of the park. It's a really, really great figure. It looks fantastic. And he's just such an iconic part of the series.
I agree. Davros is the one to beat. And I do prefer the Michael Wisher original depiction that they provided in the Genesis of the Daleks figure set. Okay, Matthew, what unreleased version of the Doctor would you like to see them make?
If there was one variation of Doctor that I would love to see released, it has to be the third Doctor in the red velvet jacket with the open white frilly shirt from season 8. The reason why I want to see this version is because it's really the predominant version of the third Doctor that we don't have. And it would also leave it open for other variations, other repaints further down the line, like the blue version of that same figure. So that would be great. But otherwise, I think in terms of Doctors, we've done incredibly well in this line.
It's such a hard call because they've done so many versions. But I guess to fill a glaring hole, for me, it would have to be the second Doctor in that massive fur coat. Okay, now, unreleased companions. Which unreleased companion would you like to see them tackle?
When it comes to companions, that's more of a tricky question because there are so many companions that we don't have. However, I'm going to go with Sarah Jane Smith, simply because she is my favourite companion. And the variation of outfit that I would like to see her in is the denim outfit that she wore in Planet of Evil, just because it's a nice looking outfit, really. That's all I can say. I know some people are probably going to say, why not the Andy Pandy look from Hand of Fear? But I think the denim look is slightly more understated.
You know, it's funny you say that, Matthew, because my pick is exactly the same, all the way down to the version. And I've decided to do something about it. My friend Ben Elgar is customizing a Planet of Evil Sarah Jane Smith for me from the ground up for my collection as we speak. Character options, you need to get this figure made stat. Matthew, thank you so much for collaborating with us on this video series. It has been extremely enriching and enlightening. And anybody who's interested in Doctor Who toys, please go check out Batman March, Matthew's channel, and consider subscribing. There will be more Doctor Who videos coming soon to RetroBlasting. And here's a little preview of the next one.
Have you met Miss Smith? She's my best friend.
Don't forget me.
Don't you forget me.